Most people believe love becomes unhealthy only when it turns controlling or aggressive. Welcome to Emotional Shadow, but the truth is far more subtle, more invisible, and far more common than anyone wants to admit. Love doesn't suddenly transform into pressure with one dramatic moment. It shifts quietly through hidden emotional patterns that often feel like care, concern, or even affection. Beneath the surface of every relationship, there are psychological forces shaping how partners speak, react, withdraw, or demand connection. And most couples never realize how these patterns slowly compress the emotional space between them until one partner feels trapped, overwhelmed, or silently suffocated. To understand this shift, we need to explore how ancient survival mechanisms, early attachment wiring, and modern communication habits intersect in ways that create a powerful, invisible pressure. One that doesn't look like manipulation or control, but still bends the relationship away from balance. The roots of this issue begin in the earliest theories by psychologists like John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, who discovered that humans develop deep unconscious expectations about love before they can even speak. These attachment blueprints guide how we seek reassurance, how we ask for closeness, and how we react when we sense emotional distance. But what these early researchers hinted at yet never fully explored is the idea that each attachment pattern naturally carries a hidden pressure. The anxious partner pressures through fear of loss. The avoidant partner pressures through silence and distance. And even the secure partner can pressure unintentionally by expecting emotional maturity or communication skills the other person never developed. The twist is that these pressures don't begin as harmful behaviors. They begin as attempts to connect, attempts to restore emotional safety. But once connection becomes tied to fear, the relationship enters a dangerous psychological loop. This loop forms gradually. In the beginning, everything feels warm and effortless. Messages are long and enthusiastic, but slowly, without anyone noticing, a dependence on this emotional rhythm forms. When one partner delays a reply, the other feels a pinch of anxiety. When one partner seems distracted, when one person expresses a need, the other hears it as responsibility. And so love begins to shift from something freely given to something silently expected. The rise of this pressure becomes visible through small but repeated behaviors. Constant double needing reassurance that the other person isn't upset, asking for explanations for tiny, harmless actions, or withholding affection as a way to test loyalty. These behaviors often start from good intentions, wanting clarity, wanting closeness, wanting consistency, but each one creates a subtle emotional weight the partner can feel, even if they cannot articulate it. Eventually, these repeated patterns reach a breaking point. The partner feeling pressured begins to shrink internally. They stop sharing openly because they fear their words will trigger anxiety or misunderstanding. They hesitate to express frustration because they worry it will lead to emotional spirals. They become overly careful, overly filtered, and overly cautious just to avoid disappointing or triggering the other person. This creates a psychological divide. One partner becomes hyperactive in maintaining connection, while the other becomes hyperpassive in avoiding conflict. The result is not harmony. Over time, pressure turns into resentment. Resentment turns into withdrawal, and withdrawal triggers even more pressure, creating a cycle that feels impossible to escape. The consequences on emotional intimacy are severe. The relationship stops feeling like a shared space and starts feeling like a performance. The pressured partner feels like they're walking on eggshells. The partner applying pressure feels ignored, unimportant, or undervalued. The more one demands closeness, the more the other retreats. The more one retreats, the more the other demands. Attempts to fix the situation often fail because both sides misunderstand the true source of the problem. The other thinks the issue is emotional intensity, but beneath all of it lies the same root: hidden patterns of pressure created by unspoken fears, unmet emotional needs, and long-standing psychological habits formed long before the relationship existed. As this issue merges with modern love trends, the problem intensifies. Research today shows that people are more anxious in relationships than ever before. Digital communication feeds insecurity by creating constant comparison, constant monitoring, and constant opportunities for misinterpretation. A message left unseen, a delayed reply, a shift in Tony's tiny digital cues trigger enormous emotional reactions. And because texting lacks nuance, assumptions fill the gaps. If they use fewer emojis, we assume it's a pulling away. If they respond with short replies, we assume something is wrong. These assumptions then drive reactive behavior's reassurance, seeking pressure disguised as curiosity, or manipulation disguised as vulnerability. Manipulation in these cases doesn't look like classic control. It looks like soft guilt. I just feel like you don't care the same way. It looks like emotional obligation. Why didn't you tell me earlier? It looks like subtle fear. Maybe you don't love me anymore. None of this is intended to harm, yet all of it slowly tightens the emotional space until love becomes cramped, tense, and heavy. Modern data also reveals a pattern now called reciprocal pressure escalation, where one partner's anxiety automatically triggers the other's withdrawal, and the withdrawal automatically triggers more anxiety. Couples repeat this pattern for years without realizing it, believing the issue is timing, communication style, or personality differences, when in reality they're trapped in a psychological loop built from invisible emotional rules neither of them consciously understands. These invisible patterns are the true chains that trap love, not arguments, but the slow, creeping expectation that your partner must respond exactly the way you emotionally need. Not because they want to, but because the relationship depends on it. This is the moment love transitions into pressure, when emotional reactions replace emotional choices, when connection becomes a demand instead of a desire, when affection becomes a responsibility instead of a gift. And this transition, once it happens, is extremely difficult to reverse, unless both partners recognize the patterns. To break these invisible chains, there are 3 powerful takeaways every couple needs to understand. First, emotional needs are valid, but emotional entitlement is not. You are allowed to want reassurance, closeness, and validation. But your partner is not responsible for managing your internal fears or past trauma. When you place that responsibility on them, pressure becomes inevitable. Second, emotional space is not emotional rejection. Many partners confuse silence with distance, independence with disconnection, and personal time with loss of interest. Understanding this difference prevents the anxiety withdrawal cycle from taking over the relationship. Third, communication must include curiosity, not just expression. They state feelings, but don't explore each other's hidden assumptions, fears, or interpretations. Without curiosity, every conversation becomes a subtle negotiation of pressure rather than a pathway to clarity. Ultimately, the fragility of trust and love lies not in the dramatic betrayals people expect, but in the quiet psychological patterns they overlook every day. But it cannot survive emotional pressure disguised as affection. Recognizing these hidden patterns is the first step toward deeper intimacy, healthier communication, and genuine connection that doesn't suffocate either partner. If you're ready to understand the silent forces shaping your relationships and uncover truths most people never see until it is too late, stay connected, explore more from this channel, and continue your journey into the psychology of real, resilient,